Hey, my name is Hart. I'm a producer from the Bay Area, California, and today I'm going to show you how I make a glitchy garage style track in Ableton Live. So before I start creating the main loop for my track, I like to set several things up in my template first. So for this track, I have my BPM set at 132. I've set my global scale to A minor, which can be really helpful if you're using the piano roll. I also have several return tracks that I've created here, so I have a large reverb with an EQ, a smaller reverb also with an EQ, and a grain delay with Soothe 2. And that's pretty much all I'm going to set up before I start making some music. So I'd like to start by creating an atmospheric pad. And one thing that I really enjoy doing is kind of stretching and smearing an arpeggiated sequence into this kind of lush evolving texture that can just sit nicely in the back of the track. So I've created a really simple patch in Meld that sounds like this. And I've created a MIDI clip here that's just an A minor 9 chord. So what I will do is I'm going to turn on this arpeggiator that I have here, and what an arpeggiator does is basically takes the individual notes of this chord and can play them in different patterns. This one I have it set to down. You can set the rate, which is how fast it is. You can set steps, which is basically how many octaves it will cycle through. And the gate, which is how long or short those notes will be as they're playing. So since I want to do a pad, I wanted this to be a little bit longer. So next I added a grain delay, which is really adding a lot of texture here. Basically, this is chopping up the delays into smaller pieces, and you can get some really, really nice textures if you play around with some of these settings. And lastly, this gated delay, which also allows you to add some reverses in those delays, just adding a little bit more texture. So what I want to do now that I have this set up is I want to add another audio track. I'm going to set this to resampling, and I'm going to play around with some of the settings on this grain delay and resample the audio. And the next step will be kind of smoothing this out so it actually sounds like a pad. First thing I like to do is kind of stretch this. I'm going to come here, make sure that warp is enabled, and I'm going to hold shift and you get this nice little arrow. So now you can actually pull this, and I'm just going to double the length. So now we can just hear it's a little bit slower. And next I'm going to add echo. And when echo is set to a little bit higher, dry, wet, it does a really great job of smearing the sounds together. Also upping the feedback so you're getting more of those echoes. It just kind of makes it so there's not one specific note happening. Next I have spectral time. And what spectral time can do is it can actually freeze incoming audio, and it has a separate delay section as well. So what I did was I turned on the freeze option. So if I turn this off for now, we'll turn this back on. And right now it's completely frozen. It's not letting new audio in. So I want to hit retrigger. And I have the interval set to every 16th note. And that's really helping to just smooth the sound out. And lastly for now, I'm just going to add an EQ8 just to kind of contain it into this area of the frequency spectrum. Next, I'd like to create some glitchy percussion sounds, and Granulator 3 is the perfect tool for this. So I have this full drum loop that I want to start with. I went ahead and dropped that entire sample into an instance of Granulator 3. And Granulator can basically play this sample, and you can change the start position, the scan, which is how far it will scan away from that position, and the grain size, which is basically how small or large the grains of audio coming out will be. This is also just like sampler, so if you play it lower on your keyboard versus higher, it will change the pitch. So I'm going to go ahead and place some notes kind of in the middle of the keyboard and adjust some of these parameters and resample it while I'm doing this. So here's my resampled audio with all of those nice glitchy sounds in it. And the next step is, how do I actually use this and turn it into a rhythmic idea that I can use in my track? What I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this audio clip and come down here to this option called Slice to New MIDI Track. And what this is going to allow me to do is slice this audio into a drum rack. So I want it to create by slice per transient, so this is the right option. And I'm going to leave slicing preset on the default. And it's just going to take all of these little snippets and create a brand new drum rack for me. So now I could play this melodically on my keyboard if I want. And these are all the individual little MIDI hits here. I'm going to hit Control A and just delete this. And instead of just playing this in manually and trying to figure out a cool rhythm, what I want to do is use one of Live 12's new generate options. I'm going to come down here to the generate menu and use seed. And basically what that will do is allow you to create different melodies or different MIDI patterns based on these options. So pitch, this isn't a melodic instrument, so basically it's going to use the different slices in the drum rack. That's why it says slice instead of an actual note. And you actually can create all the way from just a couple of them or all of them. So I'm just going to select all of them. Duration, so this is the note length. It's between 1/32 and 1/4 note. Velocity, I'm going to leave. And then the voices, this can change how many notes you can stack on top of each other. And density is how many or how few notes it's actually going to generate. I'm going to pick somewhere in between here and let's just see how this sounds. I don't really like that one, so let's maybe take the voices down and let's increase the density a little bit. So this can be a really fun way to just go through and create interesting rhythms that you wouldn't probably normally come up with on your own. If you like, say, this section but not the rest of it, you can come up here, select all of this, delete it, and then just select the area that you want, hit generate. And it'll keep this section and just create new sections here. So you can basically come in and just refine this over and over again. So I'm going to play around with this until I get something that I like. After tweaking it a few times, this is what I ended up sticking with. So I think that glitchy percussion sounds great, and it's going to add a ton of groove to the track. I went ahead and penciled in a simple kick and snare pattern just to kind of complement it, and it sounds like this all together. And just to kind of finish these drums off, I want to add kind of a more steady hi-hat just to keep the beat. So I went ahead and loaded a hi-hat on this channel. I'm just going to select this area, Control-Shift-M, and that will create a new MIDI clip for me. I'm going to hit B just to bring up the pencil tool, and I'm just going to draw in a bunch of 16th notes here. Machine gun isn't really the vibe that I'm going for here. So there's a couple things we can do to make this sound a little more rhythmic. One of my favorites is to come down here to the velocity, and we have this randomize button. And what that's going to do is randomize the velocity of each note in here. And this can really give you a more humanized feel. It can also create different rhythmic feel that maybe you wouldn't do on your own. This is a really cool way to just see what it gives you. That already sounds way cooler. Another thing we can do is actually add some groove. So if I come in here, I can grab something from the groove pool. One of my favorites is this Logic option. So I'm going to look for Logic Swing 16ths. Just something kind of subtle. Drop that in there. And that sounds pretty good. Another thing I like to do with my hi-hats is come in here to the control section on the simpler and just turn the random panning up a little bit. So it's just going to kind of give you a little randomness in the stereo field. Now that the drums are done, I want to go ahead and add a bass. I'm going to create a Reese style bass from scratch using Ableton's wavetable. So I have wavetable loaded on this MIDI track, which I have already labeled bass, and I'm starting with this really simple patch that is just 2 sawtooth waves. One is slightly detuned from the other. It sounds like this. I went ahead and turned off the filter inside of Wavetable because I'm going to use an auto filter to kind of control the envelope. I went ahead and changed the amplitude envelope to look similar to this. And then important if you're making a bass, you usually want to change this from poly, which just means you can play multiple notes at once, to mono, which means we can only play one note at a time. Also important here, if you want to get that slide between notes, like that, we turn the glide on, and for this patch, I'm using about 255 milliseconds. So now I can start shaping the sound. So I've loaded a bunch of different effects on here, and I'm gonna start with roar for some distortion, but actually before I do that, I wanna turn on this auto filter, which I've just taken the frequency down. So we're cutting off all of those harsher, brighter frequencies that I don't really want in my bass anyway. So now I'm gonna turn on roar, and I'm gonna add about 4.5 dB of drive. I'm going to change the shaper to polynomial, which is one of my favorites for bass. And I really like this kind of movement it's giving when this amount is changing. So I'm going to come into Roar's built-in modulation. So let's open this up. And I'm going to come into the mod sources, and I'm going to use LFO1. So let's just leave this synced at 1 bar for now. And I'm going to come into the matrix. And I can just click on whatever I actually want to modulate. So I'm going to click on the shaper amount, and we'll drag this up. So that's just giving it some nice movement. Next, I'm going to turn on this auto filter, and I'm going to change it from the low pass mode to the notch mode. And let's drag this down somewhere to about here. And I'm going to take the resonance up. And then I'm going to turn on this LFO, and basically what this is going to do is it's going to move this back and forth. So I'm going to put the amount somewhere around here, and let's increase the rate. So now we can hear that also just kind of giving it that swirling movement. Next, I want to turn on this chorus, and this is going to just give the bass some extra stereo width. And I really only want to do that to the upper frequencies, so I'm going to turn this option here, so it's only going to affect things above this cutoff. And then I'm going to take the dry wet down somewhere to around here. Take the rate down as well so it's not quite as fast. I also have hybrid reverb on here. And I want to change the blend from 50-50 to 100. So it's only going to use the algorithmic portion of the hybrid reverb. I have the dry wet set to about 33%. And one of the things I like most about this hybrid reverb is the built-in EQ. So I really don't want reverb on these lower frequencies, so I have those cut off, and we're really only putting it on the upper frequencies here. Lastly, I have Duck, which is my favorite sidechaining plugin. So we can have this set to just go every quarter note, or we can actually just set this, which is what I want to do, to sidechain to my kick. I'm going to play in some piano chords using the bass notes that we just created. So we're following along with the A, G, F, and E. So since we're in A minor, we have that A minor chord, which is the 1, the G major, which is the 7, the F, which is the 6, and here we're playing an E, and I just inverted this, so this just took this E up an octave. And then for the melody up here, I'm basically just kind of playing around between the E and the B, and that's just kind of complementing the rest of the chords underneath. And just to go over the effects chain I have for this piano, this is pretty typical of what I normally do. I love Ableton's velocity effect here, and I just turn this down so that the piano is not too harsh, just keeps it nice and soft. I'm using Roar on the multi-band mode, which means you can use different types of saturation on different bands of the frequency spectrum here. So I'm not really saturating any of the lows, but a tiny bit in the mids and a little bit in the high. So if I turn this off, just really gives it some nice brightness. And then an EQ here to cut off any of those lows and just bring it up again to make it a little bit brighter in there. A little bit of glue compression. And again, I'm using Duck to sidechain it to the kick. That piano will serve as the main melodic idea throughout the track, but before I start arranging, I want to have one other melodic element just to keep it interesting. So I found this loop that sounds like this. And it sounds nice with the rest of the elements I have already, but it's kind of boring. So what I want to do is use Roar's feedback mode to give it a little bit of movement and just make it a more interesting element in my track. I've dropped an instance of Roar onto that audio track with the loop, and I want to change the routing from single to feedback. And right now the blend is at 50-50, meaning half of it is going to the direct signal and half to the feedback. And I actually want to change that to 100% to the feedback. And if I hit play right now, you won't hear anything because we need to turn this amount over here in the feedback mode up. So now we can actually hear just the feedback that's coming through. And I'm going to go ahead and change this from time to dotted, and I'm going to leave it at half notes. And this is really important down here as well. So this is actually where the center of the bandpass that's in the path of the feedback is, where it's going to be centered. So I'm going to pick somewhere around like 3,000-ish. And this is actually how large or small the bandpass is going to be. So if we play this, you can hear that's kind of interesting if we're changing the size of that bandpass. So again, I'm going to come into the modulation here, and I'm going to use LFO1, which is synced to a rate of 1. And I'm going to come to the matrix. I'm going to click on the thing that I want to modulate, which is that. And I'm going to drag this up. And let's go ahead and add a little bit of distortion here. So I'm going to use the shards. And I think that already sounds a lot more interesting than the original loop. I have this audio track here set to resampling, and since I have it soloed, it's only going to record this. So I'm going to go ahead and record that resampled audio. And now that I have that resampled audio, one of my favorite things to do is actually come right into the audio clip. So I'm going to double click to pull that up. And you can actually come in here, and I have a lot of audio recorded, and you can find some really interesting patterns and rhythms if you just come in and loop little sections of it. So I'm going to go ahead and loop 18 through 22. And if I hit Control L, it's going to change those brackets so it's only looping the section. And you can also bring in this one, and you can actually change the start point. So I'm going to have it start right here. And this is just an interesting way to change up your melody and make something kind of unique. I went ahead and arranged the track. Most of it's the same, including the main piano idea, that synth loop with the Roar feedback mode, the bass, and our drums with the glitch percussion. But let me walk you through some of the new elements and some tips on how to keep your arrangement interesting. So as I was arranging this, the first thing that I kind of wanted to add was a vocal. So I found a loop that I thought fit the vibe of the track, and then I went through and found little areas throughout the track where I thought a vocal chop would sound nice, just kind of melodically. And so I placed pieces there, and then what you can do is hold Control and Shift, and you'll get this little pointer finger, and you can actually drag through the entire loop, and you can fit pieces in that sound good in the spaces that you've chosen. So I just added some pretty simple processing here, a de-esser, EQ8, a gate to kind of clean it up. It was a bit noisy, some compression, and then to have that nice delay on the end there, I just added an audio effect rack on the channel. So I have this is just the dry vocal, and then I have a delay on here just so I can automate the volume on and off so the delay is not drowning out the dry vocal. Other than adding new elements, there are ways to make your arrangement more interesting. You'll see here I have gaps just to kind of allow the track to breathe in certain areas. So this one here is right before the glitch percussion comes in, and it kind of is introducing, we're ending the intro into this kind of chorusy section. And you can also probably hear that I have some automation on this as well, which is another great way to add some life to your arrangement. So I just have this EQ8, and I have this high pass filter automated to kind of pull out all of the low frequencies right here before we hit that break. Something else I like to do is kind of interplay between these melodies, and I kind of mentioned this before I started arranging. So we have this nice piano with the chords. It also has this kind of top melody. And I'm introducing this synth melody that we made with Roar, and I'm taking away that top melody just so the two melodies aren't competing. Another thing I did with this same melody, I didn't really want to repeat this synth melody for this long. So I took the same audio, but what I did was I actually put an auto filter on here and changed it so it has this LFO that's automated in steps. It's going between different times. So the loop goes from sounding like this to this. And this is a really cool transition effect, so I just spun that LFO up as fast as it would go and just kind of spinning out. And then we have this hybrid reverb that I automated to come on pretty much full on here so that it's just extending into this gap. And pair that with just a simple white noise riser, and I think they sound really, really good together. I'm also a big fan of fusing electronic and organic elements together in my tracks, so I thought adding these birds in the breakdown section was a nice touch. And I think to finish this track off, one thing I want to add is one more organic section in the outro. So I'm going to go ahead and use my electric violin and record in some strings. For recording those strings, I just have them running through the Archetype Corey Wong amp sim, and all of them just have a little bit different EQ to help them fit together. And I also have them panned differently, so the high part is centered, and this part is slightly to the left, this one's slightly to the right. Group processing on those, I have a little bit of compression, Roar to give it a little bit extra brightness, and then Soothe too, because anybody who plays violin knows it can get a little shrill. So we're using the D shrill violin preset there to help with that. And lastly, that grain delay that I have had sitting here this entire time, I am sending all of that to there. And just a quick peek at my mastering chain here. I'm just using Ableton Saturator on the soft clip mode to give it a little bit of drive. I have Pro Q3 here, cutting off any of those very lows, a little bit of automated EQ here so it didn't get too muddy, a little bit of glue compression, also adding some more gain, a utility to keep all of those bottom frequencies in mono, and just a limiter. My name is Hart. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed seeing how I make a track in Ableton Live.